And so basically, what the talk normally talks about is the what behind what's in a nutrition label. You guys are going to get more of the why and the how. So we're rather than talking so much about like what is a macro, we're going to talk about dissecting them into their individual parts and seeing how they affect your body. So that hopefully whenever you guys look at nutrition labels in the future, you guys can make a little bit better informed decisions. Also, at any point, if you guys have a question, raise your hand, and I'm happy to answer it. Also, if I'm ever going over your head, please stop me, because this stuff gets confusing. A lot of it's kind of deep-rooted in chemistry, and at any point, if you guys have a question, just raise your hand, and I'm happy to answer it. So, to talk about why behind what your metabolism is, and what your body does with the food that you eat, you need to know what your metabolism's purpose is. So in general, your metabolism's purpose is to increase the energy of your body. A metabolism is just the sum of all the chemical reactions that happen within yourself. So be it creating energy, be it breaking down food, be it drinking a soda, be it doing a push-up. There's chemical reactions that are happening in all of these different situations that make up what your metabolism is. And your metabolism has two main points, two main purposes. First, create potential energy, and second, to use it. These are what life is about, is creating energy and using it to replicate yourself. So, this is all analogous to your car. You guys all understand what a car is. You put gasoline in, and it rolls forwards. But there's a lot that goes on under the hood between putting that gasoline in and making that car go forwards. So creating that potential energy is analogous to charging your battery. So it's like, what that looks like in your body is there's a molecule called NAD, and it doesn't matter what it looks like. All you need to know is that it's analogous to your car battery, and that electric energy gets attached to this NAD, and it starts your car whenever you want to start to move. Now, putting fuel in your car is eating food. Now, there's three different types of fuel that we use on a daily basis and that are relevant to a nutrition label. There's protein, there's carbohydrates, and there's fat. And for the purpose of an analogy later, we're gonna talk about alcohol as another macronutrient. So, charging your car battery is increasing potential energy. It's putting an electron on NAD, and putting gas in your car is eating food. Now, expending that potential energy, if you want to move your car, you have to start your car first. So you get a little zap from your car battery, and then you start to burn food. So that's analogous to taking that electron that you put on NAD, just a little bit of electric zap, and starting your car battery. You guys have heard of mitochondria? Yes? Cool. I don't even have to say it. So that electron is what starts your mitochondria. Okay? Now, where the fuel for that mitochondria came from is your food, and what the eventual product of that mitochondria is called ATP. Now, ATP is effectively a measure of how much energy is in your cells, and that's all that we need to know about. It's like money within your cells. It's currency. So your body is constantly fighting for ATP from other parts of your body, and whatever needs to get done the most gets allocated that ATP. So now you guys know a little bit about what metabolism is. One more thing. Okay, so your metabolism, this is going to tie into calories. You guys all know what a calorie is. Your metabolism, at the end of the day, is taking in carbon atoms, breathing in, so eating carbon, breathing in oxygen, and then eating nitrogen. There's three main things that we care about: carbon, nitrogen, oxygen. You die the quickest if you don't breathe oxygen. You die slightly slower if you don't eat nitrogen, and you die the slowest if you don't eat carbon. They're very essential. Now, those things start over here. There's innumerable metabolic pathways that they run through, and then you breathe out carbon dioxide, and you pee out urea, which is nitrogen, basically. So it comes in, goes out, and there's this giant pathway of stuff that happens in between. So, what happens to those molecules is your metabolism. And the form in which those molecules enter your body greatly affects the form in which they get taken through your metabolism. There's carbon atoms in gasoline, but if you drink gasoline, you don't feel good the next day. If you drink alcohol, you don't feel good the next day. It's because they have different metabolic properties. So, calories do matter. They matter for how much energy is in your body. They also matter for how many atoms are in your body. You have to eat stuff to stay as you are. But the type of calories that you eat very much makes a difference. Now, this is a charged topic. So, calories are what ultimately matters for the size of your body. How much energy that comes in goes out. So Newton's been telling us this for a long time. Conservation, or maybe not Newton actually. So conservation of energy, there we go, that's the law that I want. So conservation of energy. There's no energy created or destroyed in your body. You just take energy in, some of it gets turned into you, some of it goes. And there's nothing, it's just a simple mathematical equation. Just plus energy minus energy equals you. But metabolically, you can be far healthier or far worse off depending on what the types of atoms and molecules that you take in are. If I want to eat 2,000 calories, let's say my basal metabolic rate is 2,000 calories. So that basal metabolic rate is if I was to lay down here, just chill, for 24 hours, the amount of calories that I would spend is my basal metabolic rate. If I was to, let's say that's 2,000 calories. If I was to eat exactly 2,000 calories of, let's make it easy, all alcohol or all broccoli, totally different things are going to happen in my body. Totally different things. The alcohol could kill me. The broccoli, I mean, I'm fine. I'll probably feel great tomorrow. So the point of this talk is so that you can look at a nutrition label and understand that it's not so much just the calories, type of calories, and how they affect you that you should be thinking about whenever you're assessing the types of foods that you should eat. So, here's the clicker. So this is basically what's on a nutrition label. List of ingredients, nutritional content, serving size and calories, and percent daily value. So this requires a lot of math, so we're not gonna go into that so much. I've never once been like, oh, this is 60% of my percent daily value, so I'm not gonna eat it. No, I just kind of weigh it in terms of calories and make a judgment call. Also, that's no fun. It's just not, it's hard to make those decisions on a daily basis, tracking your percent daily value. So, these two things are very important. That is ultimately what's gonna decide the health and wellness of yourself going forwards, and your clients. So, once again, it's on a nutrition label. Alright, okay. Does anyone want to take a guess as to what that is? What does that mean? So look at the nutritional content and look at the ingredients. This is what you're gonna leave today armed with, is the ability to tell me what this is. Just throw a hand up. We got one? Okay.
Protein
powder. Just protein powder? Okay. Solid guess. There's a lot of protein in there. Water sufficient for processing chicken, meat byproducts. What is a meat byproduct? Liver, beef, wheat gluten, chicken meal, potato starch. That's dog food. Go home and give your dog something nice to eat. This is no dog food after today. Alright, so here's the nutrition label. That's macaroni and cheese. So, macronutrient, fat, macronutrient, carbs, macronutrient, protein. These are analogous to the types of fuels that you can put in your car. Now, your car is a very special car. It can run on 3 different types of fuels. I just showed you them. Your actual car can run on 1, but you can run on 3. Fat is pretty analogous to diesel. So diesel is it's a fuel that you use when you want to travel a long distance, but you don't need to sprint ever. Carbs is like Usain Bolt at the starting line. It's jet fuel. You're about to just go. Protein If your burning protein is probably a problem, you're probably starving. But you can. That's like our gasoline. It's in the middle. And fat, each of these have a certain rough estimate of how many calories per gram is in each of them. Fat has about 9 calories per gram. Now, about is an important statement. About. I used to take that to mean, okay, every single time I eat a gram of fat, it's exactly 9 kilocalories of energy. But that's not exactly what's happening, and that'll become evident whenever we see these molecules. Carbohydrates, about 4 kilocalories. Protein, about 4. So, just one more time. Diesel, jet fuel, gasoline. So, these things get used at different points in time. You guys ever heard the ketogenic diet? You're eating a lot of this. Your body's using a lot of this, burning a lot of this. If you're in an anaerobic state, so you don't have enough of that oxygen that you're breathing in, you're just straight up taking an axe and cutting that in half, and it's releasing energy. And you're not really, you also have aerobic metabolism going, but this is what you burn whenever you're sprinting. This, hopefully you're not burning it, but you can. So, generally associate fat with aerobic metabolism, so in the presence of oxygen. Generally associate carbohydrates as without the presence of oxygen, without enough oxygen. Both of them, there's a million caveats to what I just said, but that's a general thing. So, all right, so now let's see some of the macronutrients. So let's see the macromolecules. That is glucose. That's sugar. This is the type of sugar that if I was to take this blood sugar measuring device, that's what it registers. There's a whole bunch of these. You see these carbons? We eat these, and each one of these black bonds right there, we're going to break apart and breathe out CO2. Okay? So, at the end of your metabolism, your aerobic metabolism, this thing gets 2 oxygens attached to it, and then you breathe it out. So this is the simplest carbohydrate. It's called a monosaccharide, 1 sugar. Now, there's a prefix on that, which means that there are other prefixes that we're going to have to talk about. So you can have disaccharides. Let's talk about the other monosaccharides first. Galactose, fructose. Interesting observation about these. C6H12O6. 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 Same formula. Same formula. Completely different structures. This is a 6 atom ring. This is another 6 atom ring. This is a 5 atom ring. This you find in your blood. That you find in lactose, which is a disaccharide. That's in fruit. Here. Now, fruit is not bad for you. Fructose is really bad for you. We're going to talk about why that's the case later. So, you want to start attaching these to each other, making disaccharides. You put one of these, a glucose, on a galactose, that's a lactose. People who are lactose intolerant don't have the enzyme to break these 2 things apart. You put a glucose and a fructose, you get table sugar. Tastes super good. Fructose is very sweet. Glucose is also sweet. Galactose is also sweet. Fructose tastes the best. Also, side note, if you want to know how to make Coca-Cola, you weigh out that much sugar. That's about 2 ounces of sugar, and you put it in water. Whenever I do this talk with like high school kids, and I just like pass that thing around, they're like, that doesn't taste good if you eat it, but if you put carbonation in it, then it's good apparently. All right, so now we're starting to link these things together, right? So if you ignore this one, there, boom, disaccharide, polysaccharide. Disaccharides, polysaccharides. Now these things also, look, they're all made of glucose, but they have completely different properties. Completely different properties. Glycogen, that's in your muscles. It's the stored form of glucose. It's not in your blood, it's in your muscles, and it's soluble in water. this thing's structure. It's just a bunch of sugars attached to each other. That is insoluble. Well, there's also soluble fiber, but generally the fiber that you're going to eat in a vegetable is largely insoluble in water. Starch, that's also in vegetables. That's potatoes. There's a whole bunch of glucoses. So this we use in our body, so that's in animals, and the top one and the bottom one are in plants. So proteins, basically Legos. Basically Legos. You have DNA. This is a phone book, which is a metaphor for DNA. Let's say something goes wrong. I do 10 push-ups, tear my muscles a little bit. The cells in my chest are going to look up the proteins that I need, and I need a 24-hour fitness protein. So I'm going to give 24-hour fitness a call, and I get one amino acid, which I'm going to show you on the slides in a second. Then I get another one, and I just attach them together and make a protein. So an amino acid is the monosaccharide version of a protein. So carbs have single units, they're called monosaccharides. Proteins have single units, they're called amino acids. And whenever you attach them together, you get polysaccharides and you get proteins. So here's the 20 important amino acids for biochemistry. You do not need to know these unless you happen to be in biochemistry right now. So 9 of these are essential. Now, some of you meatheads out there have probably heard of leucine, isoleucine, where's valine? So there's 3 of them that are called branched chain amino acids, and that has to do with their chemical structure. Those ones, you drink them whenever you're working out, and they're very anabolic. So they get your metabolism going. So that's what proteins are. There are a whole bunch of those attached together in a line, and then they go to where they need to go. That we need to talk about. All right, that's a fat. So interestingly enough, structurally, the content of this candle, like the molecules in this thing, are actually a type of fat. It's called a wax, and it's a type of fat, and it happens to look like a saturated fat. So a saturated fat, what is saturated? Saturated, the definition of saturated is that there is as many as possible things in a certain volume. Those things that we're talking about are these hydrogen atoms that are attached to these carbons. So every carbon has as many hydrogens as possible attached to it. You can't fit any more, but you can take some off. That's called unsaturation. So these are saturated fats. This is the organic chemistry. This is the model of what a saturated fat looks like. This is stearic acid. This is another one called palmitic acid. So we have 16 to 0. This is an important ratio. That means there's 16 carbon atoms and there's 0 double bonds. So why do we care about double bonds? Boom, there's a double bond. If you take one of those hydrogens off, take one of these things off, suddenly there's an imbalance. And one side's heavier than the other. So what that means is that this saturated fat that was dead straight now is missing a part of it. And so this side's heavier than this side. And so it bends. It bends like that. And so you can see that depicted in oleic acid. Oleic acid is a monounsaturated fatty acid. It has one double bond, and it's bent. Now the bend is crucial because the bend affects the properties of the fat. It affects the boiling point of the fat. It affects the liquidity of the fat. You can have even more double bonds. Polyunsaturated, you've heard of these, omega-6, omega-3. They're both essential, which means you can't make them in your body. There are plenty of polyunsaturated fats that you can make in your body, but you can't make these, you have to eat these. Double bond, double bond, double bond. Now notice, this has 18 carbons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 18. That one, palmitic acid, has 16 carbons. That's why the number of calories, kilocalories, in a gram of fat is slightly variable. There's more bonds in that other, which one were we looking at? Linoleic acid. linoleic acid, and there's more carbon bonds that you can break to gain energy from. So that's why it's a variable amount of calories per gram of fat. Same with carbohydrates, same with proteins. Some of them are bigger than others, but on average, it's about 4, 9, and 4. So those are all depicted on your nutrition facts label. We have fat. So now you know what a fat looks like. It's a long string of carbons, and where it goes is it gets taken up in your cell membranes. What even does that mean? So what that means is that you have every cell, so there's, I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's a plastic case around this thing that keeps water from coming in and out of it. So your cell membrane basically chooses what comes in and out of your cells. And what goes into that cell membrane is fatty acids. And we just looked at some of them. So, fatty acids get taken up by your food and either broken down or put into your cell membranes. Now, the reason it's like diesel is because you can slowly just chop off a carbon, create energy. Chop off a carbon, create energy. Chop off a carbon. All the way up to the last carbon. Right? So, that's where energy from fat comes from. Now, in general, you want fatty acids that have more double bonds, so more bends in your cell membrane. That's because picture that you're in a train car, and it is 7:47 in New York City, and everybody is pissed off, and there's tons of people in this train car. You're gonna look like this. You're gonna look straight, you got no room to move, and it sucks. You need, now picture your buddy, he's way over there, and you need to hand him something, okay? I'm not just gonna be able to stroll through the people that are there. I have to fight my way through, and it takes me a lot of time. So if my buddy needs something, I can't just get it to him right quick, because everybody in there is acting like a saturated fatty acid in your cell membrane. They're all crammed together. They're super crammed together. But if you have unsaturated fatty acids, suddenly there's space to move. Because this guy's bent, so you can't just cram this guy up close to him. You have to actually have a little bit of distance. And so what that means is that everyone can move freely. And that's great. Because what that means is that your cell has a better chance of providing the appropriate structures to do, this is a vague way of saying this because there's a lot that's going on in the cell membrane. Your cell has the ability to provide the right proteins at the right times because the cell membrane is more fluid. So that's why you should eat polyunsaturated fatty acids. Conveniently, well, inconveniently actually, that's not on this nutrition label, but it is legally mandated to be on that nutrition label. And a lot of the times, so they're good for you. So companies that have that in their food will actually put that on there because it's a good selling point. You know what they are. So try and generally eat stuff that has unsaturated fatty acids. Olive oil has this one, oleic acid. There's a whole bunch of it in there. And it makes it liquid at room temperature, which is what you want your cell membranes to be, liquid. You want them very fluid. So you can actually tell the difference. This is overwhelmingly obvious. So you either have a saturated fat that's solid at room temperature, or you have an unsaturated fat that's liquid at room temperature. Boom. Immediate distinction. The fat in my body is a lot of saturated fat. It's solid. The fat on that bacon that you ate this morning is solid. This is liquid. That's because all of the molecules in here can't get as close together. That's a good thing. All right, so carbohydrates. That's good. All right, here. So, a carbohydrate is basically, all right, so whenever you're trying to metabolize a carbohydrate, you don't just like chop right there like you do on the fatty acid. What you do is you break it down into its individual monosaccharides, right there, and then you have enzymes that, in order to break these things apart, these are sturdy, you have to expend a little bit of energy. So remember that ATP? The ATP is the currency of the cell. So imagine that your body is a restaurant, and your restaurant wants to make money, wants more ATP. What you're going to do as a restaurant, in order to successfully make money, you have to go out and you have to buy food. You have to spend a little bit of money in order to get more money, right? Because otherwise, your restaurant's going to go out of business, you're going to die. That's the analogy. So you got to go buy food. Now, what that translates to is you attach a little molecule there, way up there, and you attach one up there. And then it breaks the molecule in half. So you've spent 2 ATPs, and then it breaks this glucose in half, and then eventually, later in metabolism, all of these bonds are broken, and you breathe out carbon dioxide, and you've created more money. Now, each one of those, the process to do that is totally different. Let's say your store has 3 different managers. Your restaurant has 3 different managers. One manager, let's make it 2. Let's forget about glucose. One manager, his name is glucose. Oh, well, his name is phosphofructokinase, but we're going to call him PF Chains. All right, so we're going to call him PF Chains. All right, he runs glucose metabolism. Whenever he's on his shift, we break down these. And then fructose, we're going to call him Johnny Appleseed. There we go. Fructose. So, PF Chains is very, very conservative with his money. PF Chains makes sure that whenever he goes to the store, he doesn't just spend all of his money at the same time. Because if he does, he's not going to be able to sell all the food that he makes. He's actually going to have to store some of it because there's not enough demand. So, Johnny Appleseed, on the other hand, he has a credit card with a low limit, but he really likes to max it out. And he goes to the store, and he's going to Whole Foods, he's not messing around. And he spends all of that money at the same time. So what that means is, basically, there's a negative feedback loop on phosphofructokinase, the enzyme that determines how much energy comes from glucose at any one point. So if energy levels are like this, so this graph is for glucose. So we have energy levels, all right, and now we eat. So immediately after we eat, there's a little teeny sugar crash. What that is that's PF Chains going to the market and spending a little energy so that you can later make more energy. And then after that little sugar crash, you start to sell the food, get more money. Okay? And you stop buying food at the appropriate time because you realize, okay, I've got enough. I don't need to spend anymore. That's called a negative feedback loop. You have one in your house. It's called your thermostat. It air conditions, and then it realizes, okay, we hit it. All right, we're at the right level. Johnny Appleseed, nothing. He has no regard for any amount of conservatism. So whenever fructose goes into your body, Johnny Appleseed just goes and spends all the energy possible. And he breaks it down. And your sugar just, immediately after you eat a bunch of sugar, a bunch of fructose specifically, you dip, for about 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours. And so you have this crazy sugar level, and you feel awful. And what that means, you don't just feel awful. Metabolically, you've been destroyed. You're terrible. So you no longer have enough energy in your cell, unless you happen to have been sprinting at the time that you drank a bunch of fructose. And furthermore, your body freaks out. Your body has what's called nutrient sensors, so they can tell how many nutrients are where. And it realizes, this is a problem. Now we don't have enough energy. We need to store energy to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future. What is stored energy called? That's called fat. So stored energy is fat. And fructose is very, very effective at storing energy. There's actually a large portion of the animal kingdom that whenever they need to hibernate, bears eat honey. There's fructose in honey. Orangutans, they eat tons of ripe fruit, just a ton, and they'll just put on pounds and pounds and pounds. And what that means is they're purposefully torching their metabolism so that they can store food because they know in the future we're not going to be able to get food because we're going to be asleep or there's going to be a drought coming or something that's going to provide you with no ability to eat food. Now, when was the last time you tried to get food and you could not succeed? That never happens. Like, it's hard, especially in America. So we put this, and you guys have heard of high fructose corn syrup? Well, a lot of food companies figured out that this stuff tastes really good, and if you put it in everything, we buy everything. So now this is in everything, and it drops your metabolism a ton, and then you start storing fat, and it also, here's the kicker, it makes you hungrier. That doesn't make you hungrier. That doesn't make you hungrier. Fat doesn't make you hungrier. Protein doesn't make you hungrier. Fructose makes you hungrier. Not a good thing, because in real life, your body says, oh my gosh, our energy levels are plummeting, so we gotta eat now. So, fructose has, it's this parable over it. So, there's an entire new disease that started appearing about 30, maybe 40 years ago that fructose brought on. You guys have heard of alcoholic fatty liver syndrome? Or fatty liver disease, excuse me. So it's when you drink a lot of alcohol for a long time, and that's metabolized in your liver. So eventually that alcohol just makes you fat in your liver. And it's a problem because then your liver can't regulate your body's chemicals as well. Fructose is also primarily metabolized in your liver. And about 40 years ago, people started seeing this giant surge in fatty liver disease. And doctors were like, are you drinking? And people would be like, no, I'm genuinely not drinking. And they would be like, sure. Well, that's because they weren't drinking, they were just eating a ton of fructose. And fructose made them hungrier, plummeted their energy levels, made them eat more, and then stored a bunch of fat on their liver. It's a major problem. Major problem. Giant contributor to heart disease. So, fructose is pretty much the only nutrient that makes energy levels in the cell fall. Now, proteins, we're not going to spend too much time on proteins because if there was one macronutrient that I would rather have you overeat, it would be protein because it's the most satiating. And it's also it has a thermic effect, so it heats up your body a little bit. So it actually, you kind of burn more calories whenever you're eating protein. So protein, hard to make a significant case about. So, why is this good for me? This is a Honeycrisp apple. These are delicious. They're the best apple. Not so hot take. These are the best apple. This is 100% juice, unfiltered, Honeycrisp apple. This got ground up and put into a can, or put into a bottle, and now it's this. I mean, you can see it, it's kind of thick. There's like, it's not pulpy, but it's like almost pulpy. No sugar added. I think there's like 80 calories in this, and it's like sugar and, it's fructose and fiber. That's what's in this. Let's read the nutrition label on here. 0 fat, 0 cholesterol, 30 milligrams of sodium, well that's not in an apple, 28 grams of carbohydrates, 0 grams of dietary fiber, that's a big point, 28 grams of sugar. Okay, but it's natural sugar, so it's not bad for me, right? No, 0 grams of added sugar, 0 grams of protein. So, this is fructose. This is fructose in a bottle. You can buy it at any store, and it will happily give you non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and make you fat along the way. It's very bad for you. So, why is this bad for you though? And why is it worse than eating the same amount of fructose in an apple? That is the question. So, humans have a tendency to eat fruit that is kind of tart. We don't like really ripe fruit. It's kind of nasty. We don't like when bananas get brown. It's gross. We don't like whenever food's been sitting around for a long time. Animals don't care, so they do that, and sometimes they'll eat stuff that's like fermented, and it makes them drunk, and it makes them really fat. But they're doing it on purpose because they need to, because otherwise they're going to die when they're hibernating. So if you gave this to an animal that was about to hibernate, it would just have a field day. I mean, this is exactly what an animal that's about to hibernate does, and it needs. Now, this all comes down to what's called chemical kinetics of your metabolism. Chemical kinetics. All that means is how fast does a chemical reaction in your metabolism take place. So, is it happening slowly over the course of 10 years? Is it happening over the course of 10 minutes? Is it happening over the course of 4 hours? This is crucial because going back to that graph of the energy within the cell, if that dip happens really fast, your body freaks out and it starts to store fat really quickly. So, the things that affect the rate of a reaction in your body are the concentration and the temperature of your body. Now, you've all probably been sick at one point. You've got a fever. So whenever your body has a fever, it raises its temperature so that the reactions happen faster so that it can better fight whatever's the invader. Now, whenever animals are trying to hibernate, they eat a whole bunch of fructose because it raises the concentration of fructose in their cells so that they can quicker put on fat. And your body's mechanisms for slowing down putting on fat don't work anymore if you overwhelm it by drinking a ton of concentrated fructose. There is nothing else in here other than fructose, and it gets into your cells immediately. So if you eat an apple and drink some water while you eat that apple, you can eat the fructose, but there's also a bunch of fiber. And fiber slows down the reaction within your body. What that means is your body has the ability to say, okay, we don't really need to store fat because our energy levels dipped a little bit, but then by the time our energy levels dipped, we started producing more energy because it gave me time to produce the energy from the food that I ate. So apples are great for you. 100% unfiltered, no sugar added, 30 grams of sodium for some reason, Honeycrisp apple juice, terrible for you, awful for you. So, now, you're eating the same amount of carbohydrates, but you're eating different types of carbohydrates. You have a lot of fiber in this apple, maybe not a lot, 4 or 5 grams. You have a lot of fiber in this apple, and a whole bunch of this. There's a ton of that. But you're diluting it with this. Now, this thing, so there's a little enzyme called phosphofructokinase that he's basically Pac-Man. And whenever he wants to eat a carbohydrate, he's going to eat glucose. And it kind of literally looks like Pac-Man. Like it's like a circle, and you can stick the glucose in there, and it chomps it, and it cuts it in half. And it can eat those really fast. It can eat a bunch of them really fast. But it only has so big of a mouth. You can only fit a glucose molecule in there. If you shove a bunch of glucose molecules, but they're connected to each other, Pac-Man can't eat that. That would be like me trying to eat an elephant. Like, that doesn't make any sense. If you cut it up a bunch, then I can eat it. But if you put that in me, I can't digest it quickly. So that slows down the reactions that are happening in your stomach. That's the exact same thing that's happening in this apple, is it's slowing down your enzymes from eating the monosaccharides quickly, which keeps your energy from dipping, which keeps you from storing fat. And it's also more satiating. So, salt. So we've talked a little bit about chemical kinetics. Now, salt. Salt is known to have a giant effect on your blood pressure. It's supposed to. So it does. It really raises your blood pressure a little bit. I don't think I have any salt molecules in here. Sodium and, we can put it on that. Sodium and chloride. Sodium and chloride. That's what a salt molecule is. Now, whenever you have let's make it a fish tank, and we have a semi-permeable membrane between two sides of this fish tank. Okay? So that means water can come in and out, but other stuff really can't. But water can, because water's really small. If you pour a bunch of salt in one side of that membrane, there's what's called osmotic pressure that happens between the two sides of the membrane, and that's dependent on the concentration of salt. Osmotic pressure pulls water from the side that is lower concentration of salt to the side that is higher concentration of salt until it evens out. Now this happens in your body every time you drink anything. So not only is concentration important for the types of things that you gain energy from, like fructose, but it's also important for pretty much anything that affects your body metabolically. So if you drink a bunch of salty water, if you drink straight up like the saltiest beef stew of all time, like just tons of salt, grams of salt, not milligrams of salt, you got a problem because you're no longer at the right concentration for your body. So you're actually pulling water out of your cells and into your stomach briefly. There is no way that that's good for you, and it's very bad for you. And then your body senses, oh my gosh, there is a whole bunch of water getting pulled out of my cells right now. It spazzes out, and then it raises your blood pressure for 4 hours. That's a problem. But Dr. Rick Johnson, who's a nephrologist at the University of Colorado, figured out that if you actually drink a bunch of water before you go and eat something that's salty, and you can replicate the amount of concentration that's in your body, that doesn't happen because there's no osmotic pressure between your cells and whatever's in your stomach. So you can actually kind of blunt the effects of eating a lot of salt by drinking a bunch of water. Same thing happens for fructose. If you want to slow down the chemical kinetics of digesting this, reduce the concentration. Reduce the concentration. Drink a bunch of water, and then eat it with something else that is not fructose. Interestingly, going back to a calorie is not necessarily a calorie. If you feed rats a 10% reduced calorie, Rick Johnson did the same study. If you feed rats a 10% reduction in calories, and then feed another group of rats a 10% reduction in calories, but one of those rats groups has a super high fructose diet, super high sugar diet, and the other one has a normal, healthy rat food diet. I don't know what that consists of, but this group is super metabolically healthy. They actually, the group in his study actually didn't lose weight, even though there was a 10% reduction in calories, because their basal metabolic rate, those nutrient sensors that we talked about, figured out, okay, well, we just need to burn less calories so we don't lose weight. So, slowed down their metabolism. This group all got diabetes, even though they ate the same amount of calories. They all got diabetes, and they died. It was bad. But they ate the same amount of calories. The amount of calories that you eat does not make a difference for your is the thing that determines your size. So if you eat more energy, you eat more carbon atoms, you eat more nitrogen atoms, that means that you can put more of them inside of yourself. But the pathway from eating those carbon and nitrogen atoms to breathing out CO2 and peeing out urea is totally different and leads to different effects in your body. You were effectively preparing the rats for hibernation over here, and they were just living a normal life over there. So they all got fat and diabetic, not fat. They all got metabolically deranged, and they could no longer appropriately deal with nutrients, and they became diabetic. These ones were healthy. It's because of the fact that they ate a highly concentrated sugar diet. Now, let's go look at an actual nutrition. All right. So what do I look at after I see nutrition? I look at the calories. I look at the serving size. That math's really important. This has 4,000 calories. 33 servings at 120 calories per serving. That's a lot of calories. That's like 3,600 calories, roughly. Oh, more than that, like 5,000. 4,000, roughly. So if I drank this, I wouldn't need to eat for about a day and a half after I puked. And then if I drink one serving of this whole thing, which is actually less liquid, more liquid, it's like 200 calories. 80 calories and 2.5 servings, that's 200. So I look at the calories per serving, and I look at this. Now this one's a little outdated. We no longer put calories from fat, and also we have mandated added sugars down here. But added sugars, as we now know, the molecule is the molecule is the molecule. If you add that versus it was in there originally, like it's still the same thing. that would be like, oh, we added people to this room. Like, well, they're people, like people, like people. So, so if you add sugars, that's fine. What are you eating though? If you're eating an apple and someone sprinkled a little bit of glucose on there, who cares? Because you're eating an apple. But if this has 0 added sugar. This would have less added sugar than putting sugar on that apple, and it's way worse for you because there's nothing else in it. So I look at sugars. I look at fiber. Now, most fiber on a nutrition facts label is soluble fiber. What you guys need is both soluble and insoluble fiber. Soluble and insoluble fiber, so there's a big difference between insoluble fiber. That's what's in this. And if I put this apple in water, it's not going to dissolve. It's going to stay together. Soluble and insoluble fiber both make up part of this lattice in your gut. It helps prevent leaky gut, whatever. And I wish that I could tell you guys more about the mechanisms behind which that happens, but I just know that you need to eat a lot of fiber. Sodium, minimize it, but if there's sodium, drink water. Drink a lot of water and drink it before you eat the sodium, because that's important. If your body ever gets the chance to sense, highly concentrated sodium, the reaction's already started and the signaling molecules have already been released in your gut. So you need to drink the water before you eat the sodium. Same with sugar. Drink the water before you eat the sodium. Now, fat. I don't care so much about total fat. Recently, they took off calories from fat, so we don't need to be so worried about total fat content. What we do need to be worried about, trans fat, that's now pretty much illegal to put in your foods. You can have it in under 0.5 grams per serving, but that stuff gives you heart disease and cancer. It's terrible for you. Saturated fat, big point of contention right now in the nutrition industry. Generally, reduce it. It's the fat that is straight because it has every possible hydrogen that it could attached to the carbons. So it's straight, so you can pack it very tightly. Fat that's not on here. This is mac and cheese, by the way, so maybe don't eat mac and cheese. Polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fat, good, very good for you. So if I was going to do like a thumbs up, thumbs down type of thing, because that's what y'all are all here for. Protein is good. Sugars, bad. Fiber, good. Starches, you actually have to figure out because there's 31 grams of carbs here, 5 grams of sugar here. That means there's 0 grams of fiber. So there's something that's going into these carbs that is not fiber or sugar. That's starches. Starches depends. Sodium, by itself bad, right concentration, good. Cholesterol, depends on the person, generally minimize it. Trans fat, super bad. That's the only straight up no-go on this thing. Saturated fat, minimize it. Polyunsaturated fat and monounsaturated fat, not bad. So, that is how I read a nutrition label. And I'm open to questions. Supplements? I brought those.
Thoughts on supplements?
Thoughts on, depends on the supplement. So I take, this is what I take. I take resveratrol, melatonin, vitamin D3, and vitamin B12. It's hard to find vitamin B12 in your diet. Vitamin D3, it's a pretty common deficiency. And it's also winter, so if you're sad, seasonal affective disorder, you can take this, and theoretically it should help that. Resveratrol is the thing that's in wine that makes you live longer. You don't drink wine to get this stuff. You have to drink like some absurd amount of wine to get any functional amount of this. And I don't think anyone's going to claim that that's healthy, but if you take it, it's supposed to be good for you. And melatonin just helps me have a regular sleep pattern. So regularity with regards to sleep is really important to me, and so I use that to
So why is the keto diet so
because if you are diabetic, it's really good for you because you have problems managing your blood sugar, and so you can just not eat sugar, and then you don't have so many problems managing your blood sugar. Also, it can kind of help reverse some of the risks of type 2 diabetes, which means that you've eaten enough sugar that your body no longer has the ability to correctly process it. So the ketogenic diet helps your fuel partitioning. So you remember, fat is like diesel, gas, protein, jet fuel, carbs. Okay? So if your body is used to running on jet fuel all the time, but it's also not good at providing itself with a good level of jet fuel, that's what diabetes is. You run on carbs and you also can't control your carb levels. So what the ketogenic diet does is it trains your body to run off of diesel rather than jet fuel all the time. So it can kind of slow the effects of metabolic changes. But it doesn't, if you're already a healthy individual, I'm never going to recommend to a client that they just go on ketogenic diet if they're not either diabetic or about to be type 2 diabetic. Yes?
What are your thoughts on veganism?
Veganism is generally a good thing. Vegan people live a long time. And I personally am not a vegan, and I've seen game changers. I think that in general, if you eat a balanced diet and follow the idea of eating a lot of fiber and diluting your food before you eat it, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Now, one thing to be aware of with veganism that actually, it's actually a problem with non-vegans as well. B12, you should probably just supplement B12 in general because there's like 40% of America is deficient in B12, which is like, that's crazy. But vegans are at slightly higher risk for it because it's oftentimes found in cows that haven't fed to them. So veganism in general is probably better than anything else. It's probably better than the standard American. It is better than the standard American diet. In general, though, the reason that it's better is because it's coming from eating a lot of whole foods and fruits and vegetables. So more so focused on a lot of fiber rather than avoiding. Yes?
In terms of your supplements, do you have different times you take each of them?
I take them in the morning because I forget otherwise. Yes?
What are your thoughts on the purposeful addition of sodium?
Depends on concentration. I actually did a little thing on my Instagram a while ago where I calculated the concentration of sodium and sugar in Gatorades. So it turns out Gatorade has way too high of a concentration of sugar and way too low of a concentration of sodium. Now, you guys have heard of cholera perhaps? It's a disease where you get infected with this bacteria that makes you have crazy diarrhea. And it kills you by dehydrating. Well, it turns out if you feed people with cholera just water, they die faster. But you weren't expecting that. If you feed people with cholera really concentrated sugar and salt, they also die faster. But if you feed them physiologic levels of concentration, they live. They live. So if you could perhaps mix your own physiologic level of sugar and salt in a drink, which you can, then it's great for sports performance. But you have to measure, you have to know how much you sweat out salt, how fast you burn, you have to go to a very fancy lab.